Hello, my name is Blair Cousins, and I write science fiction and fantasy stories. Thanks so much for checking out this mini-series. I hope you enjoy my story, After Midnight, and if you do, feel free to check out my other stories linked below. Now on to the story. The office buzzed with chatter as Dave watched the daily scene unfold in front of him. Daquan, one of his office friends, was being surrounded by women cooing over his slim physique. It never got old. At least to the women, who acted this way every time Daquan walked into the office. Dave grunted as he watched Daquan fluster under the attention. He wasn't outgoing, just like Dave, but since he lost the weight, the attention flooded in. He and Daquan had been around the same size at the beginning of the year, but Daquan dropped the weight as a New Year's resolution after his brother had been diagnosed with diabetes. Dave couldn't help being a little jealous now that he was the only fat guy in the office, though he couldn't complain. Daquan had earned the attention, even if it was unwanted. Dave admired his determination and only wished he had the same drive. As the women drew closer, Daquan spotted Dave at his cubicle and waved, using him as an exit for all the attention. "Man, is it good to see you," Daquan said. "Tired of the spotlight?" Dave turned with his coffee mug in hand. "Yeah, because I want to live. I mean, have you seen Berlice's new boyfriend?" Daquan said as he ducked behind Dave's cubicle. Dave shrugged, pretending not to care about the way Daquan could be so shy when women showered him with affection. "So, hey, a couple of us are heading to Champs after work. You down?" "Nah, I think I'm going to pass," Dave said convincingly, not sure who he was trying to fool. "Aw, come on, man. You can't leave me all alone with them." Daquan dared not to make eye contact with the office women, who were not shy about their appreciation of the new eye candy. Even though they saw him every day, he was like fresh meat. Dave sighed, giving in to his friend's pleas. He didn't care for bars. Socializing there always called for more confidence than he could muster. "Okay, but only if you buy the drinks." "You got it." Daquan disappeared behind his own cubicle. The traffic was crazy getting to the bar when Dave arrived. Champs was busy, as always. It was happy hour and half-off appetizer night, a sure crowd bringer. He found his co-workers in their usual spot next to the bar and pushed his way through the swarm of people who ignored him. His co-workers laughed and carried on as Dave put on a fake smile. He was starving and hated eating in front of people. His only saving grace was that no matter how much he ordered, he could push it off as ordering it for the group. But still, he'd rather be at home. Hell-bent on eating his way through the night, Dave noticed a beautiful woman at the bar. If he were braver, he would have walked right up to her and talked to her. But those thoughts faded away when Dave saw a tall, well-built man approach her. He watched the woman's face light up immediately and slumped back into his chair, feeling every ounce of courage shatter in his mind. There was no way he had a chance with her, even with all the courage in the world. The evening turned to night, and with it came the flow of alcohol, melting all his worries away. He drank until it was way past the safety limit to drive. He would have been in real trouble if it hadn't been for Karen, the office angel of safe driving, taking him home. He thanked her and promised to bring donuts for everyone in the morning, an offer she happily accepted. Once home, Dave kicked off his shoes and plopped on the couch. He unzipped his pants, unbuttoned his shirt, and let out a huge belch. The time was 10:35 p.m. He was hungry again, and he remembered there were a bag of cheese puffs in the kitchen, but he was too comfortable to move, so he settled on an open can of honey chipotle flavored almonds, his favorites. As he ate, the effects of the alcohol started wearing off. Dave didn't know where he got his eating habits from. He struggled with his weight all his life and loathed the fact that he was 27, almost 300 pounds, and single. Everyone in his family was thin and perfect. He felt like he was cursed. He grumbled as he spun his fingers around the bottom of the crumb-filled almond container and tossed it to the coffee table, which was littered with junk food wrappers, and grabbed the remote. That little snack would have to do, he thought to himself, right before he dozed off to sleep. Zapator! Zapator zaps the weight away. You don't want to miss out on this new and amazing product. Call now for your free sample of Zapator. Dave's eyes fluttered open. He glared at the blinding light of TV. He must have fallen asleep with it on again. Call now! Health Club USA is now accepting participants in a new trial study of Zapator. Don't wait. Call now. Dave snorted at the badly animated figure of a heavyset woman being shrunk by a pill as the sales rep, who was clearly in front of a green screen, continued to pitch the product. You won't be disappointed. Call today to register for Health Club USA's free trial of Zapator. Yeah, right, Dave muttered under his breath as he stood and gathered his trash to take into the kitchen. The time on the stove flashed 3:44 a.m., and the telltale aches of his body warned him that he would pay dearly if he didn't go to bed right now. He shuffled back into the den, noticing the commercial was still on. Zapator! Zapator zaps the weight away! The commercial faded out and then replayed. Dave rolled his eyes and headed for the remote, determined to go to bed. Free trial. Call today. Zap that weight away and keep it off with Zapator. The Health Club USA phone number flashed on the screen as if it were calling to him. He knew better than to trust things advertised on infomercials, but in his drowsy state, anything sounded good. The rep on the commercial flashed a convincing smile, and Dave gave up. It was probably a sugar pill, but what did he have to lose? Dave stumbled to the end table and grabbed a pen. 1-800, Dave muttered the numbers along with the commercial. 997-4949. 997-4949. Dave yawned as he etched the last digits down. You won't be disappointed. Dave turned off the TV and stumbled to bed. The next morning, Dave saw that the pills had arrived. He wasn't expecting them to be here so soon. After all, he had just signed up only hours ago. And now the package was sitting at his doorstep. He inspected it. The sender address was local. He rattled the contents curiously as he walked into the kitchen. The box wasn't heavy, but there was definitely more than pills in it. In a hurry, he opened the package and was surprised to see that the contents looked quite legitimate. There were info packets and pamphlets with thin, happy people on them, just like the ones you see at the vitamin stores. Under that was a flip phone. He eyed it in amusement. He had had one of these back in high school and wondered what he needed it for. At the bottom was a box with 6 large pill bottles in it. He read the label on each one of the bottles. Zapator, 30 pills. 1 month supply. It seemed all right. He pushed and twisted the top to open it. The pills were blue and looked like those liquid gel pain pills. He sniffed them and shrugged, then closed the cap. At the very bottom was a big red postcard with big white letters on the front that read, Read the back. He flipped the card around and found a list of simple directions. Direction 1. Take 1 pill by mouth a day in the morning for 6 months. No change in diet or exercise necessary. Do not skip a day. Direction 2. Use telephone provided to log all weight loss and progress, including mood changes and health. Direction 3. Participation in this trial is strictly confidential. Do not disclose any information about trial to anyone. Direction number 4. All contents of this box must be returned at the completion of the study for full compensation. Point number 5. 24-hour support is available for your convenience. Text 9987 for assistance. Dave flipped the card back over and then looked at the phone. It was pretty archaic, but it looked new. He turned it on and was surprised to see how modern the screen looked. It was just like any other smartphone. Neat, Dave said to himself. He closed the phone and looked at the bottle to see if the pills needed to be taken with food. They didn't, so he quickly opened the bottle and took his first pill. He chased it with some water, feeling a little uneasy about the whole situation, but if it was advertised on TV, it must have been through some kind of vetting. He grabbed his things and hurried out the door, feeling more optimistic. True to the directions word, Dave didn't have to change his diet or exercise to see the results he wanted. He had already lost 10 pounds in the first week. The immediate results were a big ego booster for him, so much so that he decided to hit the gym and eat better anyways. And in a short time, he was already feeling better. Even the office women took notice of him, and within 3 months, he dropped from 295 pounds to 201 pounds. He was a lean, mean, fat-burning machine, all thanks to Zapator. Daquan slapped Dave on the back, admiring his muscular shoulders. "Damn, son, you look good." Dave smiled widely. "Thanks, man. I feel great now that I've dropped the extra weight." "I bet." Daquan crossed his arms and chuckled. "So, man, what's your secret? I know it ain't diet and exercise alone." Dave laughed harder than he intended and averted his eyes. "Nothing. What you see is the product of hours at the gym, followed by a full face of salad and protein bars." "Oh, I hear that," Daquan bellowed as he walked away. It was hard keeping the secret from his friends and family, but Dave wasn't completely dishonest. He'd been eating better and exercising, but thanks to Zapator, he was moving at a faster pace. There was nothing to worry about aside from the stomach aches he'd been having. Later that night, Dave's stomach pains woke him from his sleep. They were so intense it made his lower back hurt. He groaned and curled up into a tight ball. The pains had never been this bad before. It must be a side effect of Zapator. He hoped it was nothing serious, but just to be on the safe side, he grabbed his flip phone and texted support. They responded quickly and informed him they would be sending representatives over first thing in the morning to examine him. He had never talked to anyone from the company face to face, but he was eager to have a real conversation with them instead of reading text messages. He tossed and turned all night, trying to find a comfortable position to relieve the pain. He hoped they had a quick solution, because he wasn't sure how much more of this he could take. The next morning, Dave woke up early. He was groggy from last night's restless sleep, but after a nice cool shower, he was feeling better. As he dressed, he admired his facial features in the mirror. His face looked more defined, and his stomach was toned and flat. Just to think, only 3 months ago he was 100 pounds heavier. He would never have thought a day would come where he would look this good. He quickly dressed, drawing the knot on his tie and straightening it just in time for the doorbell. He rushed downstairs and opened the door, and there stood a nervous-looking man who looked like he had just run here all the way from the city, and a gorgeous blonde-haired woman. Dave smiled nervously as he noticed the beads of sweat forming on the woman's hairline, making her look like a swimsuit model who had just come from swimming, which was odd considering it was fall and no pools were open. He was so fixated on the woman he nearly forgot about the appointment, so he stumbled back and welcomed his guests, showing them to the den. Water? Tea?" Dave offered as he struggled to draw his attention from the unbuttoned white blouse the woman was wearing. "No!" the man shouted as he forced a smile. Okay." Dave brushed it off. The man reminded him of the new intern his boss just hired. The kid was a ball of nerves, but he was suave compared to this guy. Dave took a seat in front of him. He didn't want to come off as creepy, so he tried to focus on the man instead of the woman. The man still had his teeth clenched in a stiff smile. He looked to be in his early 30s. His face looked like a poorly fitted latex glove with all the wrinkles he created trying to smile. He was also sweating a lot. A quick glance at the thermostat showed a room temperature of 74 degrees. It made no sense. The woman broke the silence, tilting her head in a jerky manner like a clock hand. "Dave! Humbert! It is a pleasure to meet you. I am Glinda Glame, and this is my colleague, Chad Cham." Dave noticed her other movements were just as stiff, but ignored it. "It's nice to meet you." Dave reached out to shake her hand, but both of them responded at the same time, making it awkward to decide which hand to shake first. So he withdrew his hand, opting not to shake either, and leaned back and lifted his leg onto his knee, hoping his relaxed posture would help his two guests unwind more. "We were informed you were having stomach issues. Is that correct?" Glinda wasted no time getting to the heart of the matter. "Yeah, nothing too big. My lower stomach hurts every now and then. But last night was the worst." The woman's head tilted again to Dave's comments. The jerk reminded him of the animatronic dolls at the kids' playhouses. He wanted to laugh, but kept a straight face. But besides that, nothing else is bothering me. May we examine your stomach? The woman smiled, adjusting her posture, causing her blouse to tighten around her chest. Sure. Dave stood, feeling uneasy under Glinda's gaze. Both Glinda and Chad stood at the same time and walked around Dave, checking him out like one would do a car. It was painfully quiet. Dave wanted to say something, but the words escaped him. Then Chad pulled out a notepad and pen from his pantsuit jacket and started to jot down notes in a feverish manner. Glinda continued to walk around him, pausing in front of him with her hands hovering only inches away from his stomach. May I touch your abdomen? Sure. Dave's face started to redden as the woman pulled up his shirt and pressed her moist hand against his stomach, resting the other hand on his back. She pressed along his lower abdomen all the way up to his rib cage. Dave was melting inside. He wished this were more seductive, but she had the touch of a doctor, quick and purposeful. She made one quick glance at Chad and stepped away from Dave. It is fine. You are normal, she said without another word. Dave looked down on his stomach and tucked his shirt in. Really? You can tell all that by touching me? Yes, she said as if it were an automatic message. I don't need to give you any samples or do any tests. Dave eyed her skeptically. No further tests or samples are required. You are moving through the steps with great progress. Glinda walked over and stood next to Chad. They both smiled at Dave like a gun was being held to their heads. Okay. Dave finished tucking in his shirt. Take this. Glinda took out a plastic package from her briefcase. What's this for? Stomach pains. It will relieve your body of stomach pains. Insert tonight. Follow instruction on package. Wait, insert? Dave flipped the package over. It was a suppository. Follow the instructions on the package. Contact us if your stomach pains continue. Dave looked at them both. They were dead serious. Okay. Dave let them out, feeling a little uneasy about the meeting and the suppository, but at least relief was on the way. Over the next few months, Dave's body continued to change. His face cleared up and his skin started looking better. By the end of the 5th month, he was down to 170 pounds. He was looking good and feeling good. So good that his new body was giving him the confidence to step outside his comfort zone. For the first time in his life, he had the courage to go to a bar alone, something he would never have done 5 months ago. He strolled into the bar with a new kind of swagger, catching the sight of a brunette sitting alone at the bar. He grinned as he approached, mentally hyping himself up as he walked. This was New Dave, and New Dave was cool and in charge. Waiting for someone, Dave leaned into the bar, making eye contact with the beautiful brunette. She noticed right away how handsome he was and smiled. That obvious? She sat her elbow down on the table, resting her chin on the back of her hand. Well, you're nursing that drink like it's a sacred elixir, and folks only do that if it's a damn good alcohol or if they're biding their time. The woman chuckled into her drink, taking another sip. Well, if you must know, I'm waiting for my friend. She was supposed to ditch her kid and meet me here, but I guess the little bugger kept her up. Well, they don't call them anchors for nothing. The bartender walked by and Dave ordered a rum and coke. What about you? The woman held her drink close to her lips as she checked Dave out. She smirked and finished her drink. I'm Amanda, by the way. Dave, he thanked the bartender for the drink and opened up a tab. You mind? Dave pointed to her empty glass. Sure, big guy. She smiled and raised her glass, batting her beautiful brown eyes as she drew her lips together in a seductive smile. Dave took Amanda home, and the sex was amazing. Granted, it had been a while since Dave had brought a woman home. He laid back, wondering how he ever talked his way into the situation. He turned and looked at Amanda sleeping next to him. She was beautiful, even in her sleep. If it wasn't for her racing heart and sweaty body, he would have thought this was a dream. He smiled to himself as he turned into his side and wrapped his arms around her. He could get used to this. The last few days of his 6-month trial were drawing near, and Dave almost didn't want to stop. He had lost so much weight. He was worried he would gain it all back again without Zapator. He reassured himself that everything would be okay because he had put in the work. He stopped eating junk food, he walked during his lunch breaks, and hit the gym regularly. He had nothing to worry about. On the last day of his trial, he had to go to Health Club USA's main office in Broad Isle, only a few hours away. Dave was careful not to throw anything from the box away, as instructed, and left early in the morning so he wouldn't be late for his appointment. The drive was nice, but the office was quite far from the highway. The town of Broad Isle was mostly filled with strip malls and worn-down buildings, but the office was located on the outskirts. When he pulled into the parking lot, it was mostly empty, except for a few cars. The building looked no different from any other office park. It was one story and the parking lot was a little run down, but the building looked new. Dave cut the engine and headed inside with his box in tow. When he entered, he was taken back by how freakishly cold it was inside. He felt like he was going to freeze. No one else was there but he and the receptionist, who looked perfectly normal aside from the fact that she looked like she had just finished a workout at the gym. Her face was glossy with sweat. How, David had no idea. She kept her eyes on him, but in a blank stare as David approached. "Hi, I'm Dave Humbert. I have an appointment with Glinda Glam and Chad Cham." Dave rubbed his hands together as his body shivered to adjust the drop in temperature. A moment of silence went by before the woman startled awake. "Received. Your appointment with Glinda Glam and Chad Cham will begin momentarily. Please sit in the waiting area." She pointed to the chairs. Okay. Dave looked around, unsure what to say or ask. He found a chair in front of a television, which had poor reception. It was playing reruns, but not of a show Dave liked. He glanced back at the receptionist again, but she was staring blankly at the door. She must be keeping still to preserve heat, Dave thought, because it was unbearably cold in there. Bored, Dave turned his attention to the end table. It had a few magazines on it. He could tell by the headlines they were old. They looked like someone just pulled them out of their grandmother's attic. He reached over to grab one when he heard his name being called. He turned and was happy to see Glinda. She looked even more gorgeous in her lab coat and figure-fitting skirt. She smiled with the same strained smile and held the door open for him. It was empty, not a peep or person to be heard or seen. There was no art on the walls or signs, just one long, plain hallway with a few doors. Dave followed behind Glinda in awkward silence, trying not to become fixated on her rear end. He didn't need that kind of heat. They stopped at an unmarked room, and Glinda opened the door to what looked like an interrogation room. It was small and white. Even the table and chairs were white. The room looked like it could be a set of a law drama. There were two chairs facing each other around a rectangular table. Glinda took the one farthest from the door, and Dave took the other. He placed his box on the table as he pulled the chair out and sat down. It was freezing in there, too, so cold he swore he could see his breath, but Glinda looked like she was about to die of heat stroke. "So, do I have to fill out any paperwork or anything?" Dave asked, eager to get this over with. "No additional paperwork is necessary," Glinda smiled. Behind Dave, Chad appeared in a white lab coat holding a white tin box. He nearly scared Dave half to death. Chad walked past Dave and set the box on the table and opened it. Inside of it was a syringe, a clear vial, and a rectangular plastic box, all encased in black foam. Nervous, Dave repositioned himself in his seat. "All that is required is a sample of your blood for analyzation." Glinda pulled a pair of latex gloves from her lab coat and took the needle from the box. The gauge was small, but it still made Dave feel uneasy. He swallowed hard as he watched Chad prep his arm. His hands were warm and clammy. It felt like he was being held by a dog's tongue. Dave turned away as Glinda drew the blood. It barely hurt, but he would be much happier out of this strange place. Chad placed a cotton ball on the little bead of blood and bent Dave's arm up to hold it in place. Dave watched as Glinda squeezed a little bit of blood from the vial onto the plastic rectangular box. Then they waited a few seconds in silence. Dave wished they would tell him what they were looking for. After what seemed like forever, a teeny blue line appeared on the box, and smiles of delight formed on both Glinda and Chad's faces. This was the first real smiles he had seen from them. Dave smiled too, unsure whether to be excited or concerned. Glinda withdrew a notepad from her lab coat. "Your blood test shows 100% compatibility rate." Dave mustered a smile, pretending to follow along with what they were saying. It is rare to find a human with a perfect anatomic reconstruction transformation, Glinda gleaned. Glinda grinned so widely that Dave thought her skin would rip from the tension. I don't understand. You may now move on to phase 2. Before Dave could process what was happening, 2 strong hands gripped his shoulders tightly and planted him into his seat. He turned and looked to his right, horrified by the corpse-like hand, all bony and frail, digging into his shoulder. What's going on? He jerked his head up to get a better look at his captors and froze. An eyeless face stared back at him with a mouth that looked like it was carved open with a steak knife. Beads of sweat formed at his brow as Dave's brain tried to process what was going on. You have proved a great value to us. We can now use your body to farm as many of our offspring as we want. Glinda approached Dave and ran her fingers through his thick brown hair. You can't! My family! They'll come looking for me! A smile etched across Glinda's face as she gripped his hair tighter. I think not, because no one knows you are here. Dave stared into her eyes, trembling. He had followed all the directions to a T. He had told no one about the study. His eyes broke away from hers as he glanced at the box. It was all here. Every piece of evidence. Every trace of the shady study he had signed up for only months before. Now open up wide. Glinda pulled Dave's head back by the roots of his hair and used her freakishly sweaty hands to force open his mouth. His last images were of a thick, fleshy tentacle hanging over his face, oozing saliva into his mouth.